Okay, so with Mark and Adrian, the AGM happened last week. Lots of things to talk about, lots of feedback we've already had on social media. First one for us, though, we have our local derby back. The Sheffield Tigers are up in the Premiership. Happy with that, do we think?
I think we are, aren't we, Mark?
Delighted to have Sheffield back. Obviously former top flight club to come back and get back the War of the Roses competition. We're pretty excited about.
Definitely, that was one of the things I was going to ask you about because it's been such a long time since we've seen War of the Roses. Going to see that again in 2020?
Yeah, certainly the conversation that we've early conversation we had with Sheffield is very keen to reinvigorate the War of the Roses, and we want to. So some more conversation to have with them. But yeah, we hope to make some announcements about that.
Oh, excellent. Looking forward to that. On the subject of fixed race nights, because that was one of the reasons that Sheffield decided they wanted to come up to the Premiership because they got their Thursday night race night back. Some of the fans not too happy with the fact that we've kept Mondays and Thursdays. Can you sort of just expand on that, why we've kept those race nights and why they don't necessarily have to mean poor attendances? Because we've had some great attendances at Bellevue with those race nights.
Yeah, we have, and we've got to understand that there's not a great big pool of riders around across the world at the moment. So, we have to fit in with other countries. Poland obviously have got a little bit of perhaps a pecking order, or they perceived right over race days than everybody else at the moment. And that means that we have to work with all the other federations, and we do. So the fact we've got Monday and Thursday race day is just what it's one of those things. We're not going to unfortunately get a weekend if we want to be in the Premiership. I think if we want Bellevue to be in the Championship, then that's a different matter. But I don't want to run Bellevue at a lower level than the top level that we can be in. And I don't really think our supporters would want us to do that, if in truth. So if we want to attract the best riders we can afford, it means that those riders are going to be riding in other countries, and we have to honour that. So at the moment we go with a fixed race night. So I don't think Mondays and Thursdays you can have any argument about what day works. Weekends may not work for us because of the football that goes on in Manchester. But actually we've got what we have. We've got Monday and Thursdays. And Mark and I are working very hard to make sure that we attract a crowd that will come and watch on Monday and Thursday. And as you quite rightly said, we have good strong crowd numbers, and we want that to continue. We want it to increase.
And we've seen obviously a lot more continuous riders appearances. Where when we didn't have the fixed race nights, we were using guests and we had borrowing riders here, there, and everywhere. We never had the same 1 to 7 from week in, week out. So having the fixed race night certainly gives us that. Very rarely do we rock up to on a Monday or a Thursday without the same 1 to 7. So I think the fans do appreciate that. We certainly appreciate that. So that's and part of the ISLB. If it's in the structure with Britain has the top league has Mondays and Thursdays, so we just operate under those rules.
And another thing that came out of the AGM was much tighter control on next year's Premiership Supporters Cup. Now, we featured quite prominently in that. We just missed out, unfortunately, on the trophy. But of course, there was a few eyebrows being raised when, after Swindon had won the Premiership Supporters Cup, that I think Kingsland and Wolverhampton were still running Supporters Cup meetings. So the BSPA putting a lot tighter control on when those fixtures happen, and they already know when the finals will be happening. So much better, much more fluid, you would say, in terms of that competition.
Yeah, and I think look, there was no one's real fault what happened last year. We had to start the season, if you remember, which was a bit of a washout. We got washed out of our first match. We had to postpone, if you remember, at home to Peterborough. So other clubs were affected as well. I think the difference is that we decided that we should put an emphasis on getting the cup done first and foremost, and then we concentrate on the league. And I think that's the way we ought to go anyway. So I think we've given more time this year in terms of the fixture planning, and we've started that early as well with the rest of the clubs, which I think is very good. To make sure we schedule in enough time to get the Supporters Cup, at least the qualifying rounds done, and then the final away in June-ish time. And that's really what the aim is this year.
And Mark, they want to see a lot more, engagement on social media around that competition. Part of the reason it was created was to get the fans sort of involved. Can you sort of elaborate on what is the thinking behind that? How do they want to get more people involved with the Premiership Supporters Cup?
Well, the idea is obviously to engage the supporters and the fan base, and obviously this season we used the Facebook feed, I believe.
Twitter,
and
also, Twitter, yeah.
Twitter.
We were going to use Facebook.
So next year the platforms will be open up to different social media sites, so obviously to engage with a wider audience. But that was primarily where it was focused on. We wanted to give something back to the supporters and make them engage with the event. And I think that worked. Good or bad, it certainly had that desired flow with the Supporters Cup. So rightly or wrongly, the competition is here to stay, and I'm sure that if you're a Swindon supporter, Robin supporter, you wouldn't complain about the competition.
Certainly not. And we're going to try and keep, talk about team building to another video we're going to do with you a little bit later next week, Mark. But another interesting rule that's come to the table this year, which will be put forward as a proposal for next year's AGM, is clubs being able to retain their 1 to 7 from the previous season. Now, we've heard it plenty of times before where supporters have said, we've got a great team this year, I wish we could keep all the riders next year. Is that kind of where this, idea has come from? And can you sort of elaborate on how it would affect a club if they did want to keep a certain amount of their riders? If they wanted to change one of them, does that mean we have to then go back to the points limits?
Yeah, it's a question that's been asked many years, and I've seen it. The Swedish league use it for several years, quite some time ago. But that was what the Swindon Robins brought to the table. They had a very successful campaign, and obviously their league team points limit went well and truly over the set criteria for next year. And obviously the idea of trying to do that is to keep the loyalty, and that'd be great. And you win the Premiership or win the club or win whatever it is that particular year, and then you have to tear that team apart, which it's hard for the fans to take, it's hard for the management to take, and it's also very difficult for the riders, especially when you have made this foundation and got this winning formula and have to tear it all apart. So going forward, it was very hard to implement it for next year because it was never addressed beforehand. But the teams now actually can keep the same 1 to 7 regardless of the points limit. So if you're successful, you can keep your same 1 to 7. But then you have to make any changes to that team, then you have to revert to the set league points limit.
So it could lead to even more changes than perhaps the management would like. Obviously that's for next year, so we won't elaborate too much on that. Looking at some of the feedback we've had on social media, quite a few fans saying that they were underwhelmed by the AGM statement. Some folks saying that they disagreed with the idea of not tinkering with too many things. Can you sort of elaborate a little bit more on some of the things that we have sort of that have been changed, and why do we think the fans feel underwhelmed with what they've seen so far?
Well, underwhelmed. I mean, I've seen that note, and obviously I've had a bit of that feedback directly myself as well. Yeah, okay, there wasn't great big announcements made and great whole-scale changes done. Last year when we sat and done a post-AGM review, I remember saying that this is very much like a big ocean-going tanker that's going to take time to move round, and it still is. And we have to accept that, I think. And I think that I was trying to set that sort of theme last year. This wasn't going to change overnight.
Still in dock, isn't it?
And it's slowly coming out of dock now. We're moving it forward. I think that there is, people have seen my comments in the Speedway Star last week. There are other things that were tabled. Some of those things are still in discussion. So, for instance, I'm a huge advocate of independent, management for the sport, and I absolutely fundamentally believe that will help us move the sport forward. But something as fundamental as a big change like that, and it is a huge change to the way that the sport has been run over many years, takes time to get everybody around to an understanding what we're trying to achieve, what the benefits are to the Speedway business as a whole for doing it, and that takes time. So some people get it and want it to happen, and others want to understand more information about it. So there was an awful lot discussed. So when people say, well, crikey, they've been there for 2.5 days, 3 days, what were they talking about? Trust me, an awful lot gets discussed. Not everything gets agreed, and therefore it doesn't become a change. But there's a lot of things that are being discussed, and there are a lot of things that are going to be picked up early in the new year. One of them will be the independent management, which we will revisit with more information about how it works. So who knows? It may well be that this year won't be a case of that one AGM makes loads of big announcements, then you don't hear from us, for the rest of the season. Because that's also a criticism that's labelled at the BSPA, is that it doesn't communicate, and we want to change that, and we are looking at how we affect that. So there were a few announcements that didn't come out, which are going to come out in the fullness of time. There is some work that we've done with the National Supporters Group that needs a little bit of tweaking around, so that an announcement can come out about that. So there's a number of things that have gone on at the AGM that haven't been announced, and obviously in the fullness of time there will be. But this is this was never an easy fix, to move British Speedway forward. We've got the great TV deal in place now, and we've got to build on that. But it takes time, and our supporters are great and they're very loyal, and I hope they'll understand that. Even though I accept that perhaps the announcement that went out probably wasn't too detailed, but there are things that are happening and people are working on plans. But as I've said many times before, we live in a democracy, and the BSPA is also a number of shareholders of the BSPA, and so you have to make sure that everybody wants to be part of it, and that the majority agree. So those things can sometimes take time to achieve. That's not a negative statement. It's just factual. So that's currently where we are. But there's a lot more work done than perhaps we're given credit for. But I'm sort of accepting of the fact that the statement was a bit, probably blander than it has been in previous years. But I don't think that was intentional.
No. And just finally, because obviously there's lots we could talk about the AGM, and as you say, Adrian, we'll start to see more information coming out of the BSPA about certain things that have been discussed but not been confirmed yet. But just one other thing that the fans kind of made a point about, and it was quite a big one, consistency within the teams. So, they wanted to know the amount of team changes that teams make. Some make more than others. Is that going to be limited? And will we start to see, maybe, if that is the case, more affinity between club and rider? So we start to see more of the same faces associated with the clubs each year, and they sort of become, I don't want to say part of the furniture, but there's that relationship between the club and the rider. It's not just a case of employer-employee, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, there has been some movement to try and stabilise that and show loyalty. The Premiership have come up with a plan that there'll be a transfer window and a number of transfers that are allowed per season. So how it's going to work is that basically, you've got to complete 25% of your meetings, which will be basically 6 league matches first before you can make a transfer, and then everything has to be completed by 75% of completion of your fixtures. So after 18 matches, you will no longer be able to make any transfers. So there won't be a transfer date. It'll be a period on a percentage of your completed matches. Therefore, it makes it a lot more even for the teams as well, because if you make those changes in the last minute, you can't. The new rider coming in still has to do a minimum of 6 matches. So it makes it better and more fair across the board, and we were quite happy with it. We feel that
it was your idea, Mark.
Well. Say no more. But it does allow that bit more loyalty to your riders, and benefits those guys that actually build a good team at the start.
And I think limiting the number of the transfers as well is great, because it's, as a newbie, and I still sometimes call myself a newbie with all of our fantastic fans who've been around for a very long time. Seeing teams change so dramatically during the season. You've got your team picture at the start of the season can sometimes bear no resemblance to the team picture at the end of it. I think that we've got to work with our supporters on that to give them a sense of identity, which we want as well. So I think, in fairness to, I'll use Mark as an example, and Bellevue, we had one sort of, probably you'd argue, an enforced sort of change last year we needed to make. And unfortunately that led on to 2 others just through pure injury. Otherwise, we probably would have gone through a season with just making one change. And I think 1 or 2 changes is okay. I think people understand that. But when you're making major wholesale changes, I don't really see the point of that. So that's a personal view. So I think it's a really good initiative. Well, in fact, a good rule that will be implemented. Obviously, they have to be sanctioned first of all, but they have been voted in, but they need to be sanctioned, which is probably why that's not come out in the statement yet. But I'm sure in the fullness of time that will be made.
Well, gents, thanks very much. We look forward to hearing more from the BSP. I'm certain the fans will. But yeah, for now, thank you very much.
Thank you.